Are you suffering from any illnesses?
Yes, I'm a murdering piece of shit.
Where a man drove his van onto a busy sidewalk in the middle of the day. Here's what we know right now. At least 10 people are dead, 15 injured.
And then, but I just see him just literally going over bodies.
It was one of the deadliest mass murders in Canada. A 25-year-old man went on a vicious rampage that left students, retirees, and a 94-year-old woman dead. And the reason for such a brutal crime? He had a bad luck with romance, and the world had to pay.
The uprising. I was thinking that I would inspire future masses to join me in my uprising as well.
CBS News has now identified this man as the suspect.
It's basically a movement of angry incels, so that they acknowledge the incels or the Pepe the Frog types as the more superior ones.
This is the story of the Toronto van killings of 2018 and its victims. We'll explore the senseless mass murder that exposes the ugly underbelly of the internet and the dangers that lie in echo chambers of misogyny, hate, and self-pity. This is the home that Alek Minassian was raised in Richmond Hills, a suburban neighborhood in the Greater Toronto area. Almost everyone who lives in Richmond Hills owns their home, and it boasts one of the best school systems in Canada. It was while attending one of these schools, 16th Avenue Public School, that Alek began to realize he didn't quite fit in. He struggled with tics, which are repetitive behaviors that are involuntary and often very distressing for the person experiencing them. According to former classmates, some of his tics included spitting on himself, meowing like a cat, hitting his head, and repeating the phrase, "I'm afraid of girls." But his parents, Vahe and Sona Minassian, were both very supportive of their son and his needs. They put him into groups like Helpmate, an after-school program designed to help kids with special needs. In high school, at Thornlea Secondary School, he enrolled in a special education class. Classmates described him as incredibly smart, but socially awkward and prone to throwing tantrums. People in his Richmond Hills neighborhood later commented that they knew Alek was special needs and that he often struggled to make eye contact or conversation. In addition, it seemed to them that he needed his parents' help for most of his daily functioning. In a 2008 interview about Helpmates, Alek's mom disclosed that her son had Asperger's. Asperger's is no longer used, as the symptoms and conditions have been merged with others to create autism spectrum disorder. Despite struggling to fit in and having problems with his tics, he did manage to excel in school, graduate with a good grade point average, and hold down jobs planting trees and working in a soup kitchen. Soon after graduating, Alek began to attend Seneca College in York, where he was getting a degree to work towards becoming a software engineer. However, in 2017, Alek's life made a sharp, unexpected turn. He decided to join the Canadian Armed Forces, and began his training at this base. Basic training is meant to last 16 weeks, but just after 3, Alek asked to be discharged. According to his fellow platoon mates, Alek struggled to take direction, was socially inept, and faced a lot of disciplinary action because of his inability to meet standards. He repeatedly struggled to pass morning inspections, which required him to make his bed and put together his uniform to military specifications. Soon after, Alek returned to college to complete his degree. However, throughout the entirety of his schooling, it wasn't his education that was his primary focus. It was the connections and ideology he found on 4chan and Reddit, specifically within the Incel community. Incel stands for involuntary celibate, and it's a growing subculture mainly comprised of young men. The ideology is marked by misogyny, hatred towards women, and sexually active men, and self-pity. The hatred towards women is the primary driving force in the Incel community, which stems from perceived sexual rejection. Incels have an entire glossary of terms that are, to put it mildly, insanely offensive. To sum up some of their beliefs, women are valued on their looks, and their looks alone. Men are valued on their looks first, then the money they can provide second. Women's value severely decreases after they hit 25, at which point they're more likely to date less attractive men. However, in their eyes, men who are unattractive are hopeless and unable to pursue a relationship with truly attractive women. These are the types of messages that Alek was taking in every day on the forums he used. And he wasn't just a passing member of these communities. He was close with some of its leaders, like Elliot Rodger.
I don't know why you girls aren't attracted to me, but I will punish you all for it.
In May of 2014, Elliot Rodger committed a mass murder at the University of California, Santa Barbara. Prior to his rampage, he released a 137-page manifesto detailing his life and reason for the crime. To sum it up, he wanted revenge on the women who he felt didn't want him, and the men to who those women were attracted to. In his journal, he wrote in part, "Women don't deserve any rights. They're vile, barbaric animals that need to be treated as such. Women must be quarantined like the plague they are, so that they can no longer torture decent men like myself." Elliot and Alek became fast friends after meeting on Reddit. They shared incredibly similar beliefs and vented their frustrations to one another. At the same time, they were just adding fuel to each other's hatred and misogyny. Before Elliot committed his heinous crime, which you can see us cover here, he messaged Alek, telling him that he was going to do something big. As time passed after Elliot's attack and death, Alek began to have urges to follow suit. On April 19th, immediately after completing the courses he needed to graduate, Alek sent this to a group of his fellow classmates. The classmates, who felt Alek was awkward but didn't dislike him or expect this type of behavior from him, reached out to him over the next several days, but got no response. On April 23rd, it was his Facebook friends who were faced with a concerning message. Sitting in the parking lot of a rider van rental building in Toronto, Alex typed the message and hit send. The number correlates to his identification number from his short time at boot camp. Him addressing Elliot Rodger as the Supreme Gentleman is a common phrasing used in the Incel subculture for Rodger, who many view as a hero. After sending this message to the masses, Alek put the van, a white Chevy Express, into drive and began down Yonge Street, one of the longest streets in the world, and one of the busiest in Toronto. After running a red light, Alek leapt the van onto the west side curb of Yonge Street. What happened in the next 7 minutes was a blur of violence, desperation, and confusion. Alek drove for 2.3 kilometers, about 1.5 miles, on the curb, mowing down pedestrians, fire hydrants, and anything else that stood in his way. Innocent people scattered to get out of the path of the van, which at some points was clocked going nearly 50 miles an hour. Some narrowly escaped the metric tons of metal careening towards them. Others weren't so lucky.
But I just see him just literally going over bodies, the bodies being flew in the air.
This is So Ra, a student attending the University of Toronto. She and her best friend, Sohei Chung, decided to walk to classes on the morning of April 23rd instead of taking the subway because the weather was so beautiful. All So Ra remembers is waiting at a light with Sohei, then waking up on the ground covered in blood and her face searing in pain. Sohei was on the ground beside her, not moving. So Ra described Sohei as her soulmate. Once the two met, they were inseparable. When So Ra was recovering in the hospital after breaking nearly every bone in her face, the hardest part wasn't the physical feeling. It was learning that Sohei had been killed. In the 7 minutes that it took Alek to drive that mile, 10 lives were lost and 16 people were critically injured. Perhaps the most ironic thing about Alek's attack was that it largely wasn't the people he hated, the people he was targeting, who he killed. Out of his 10 victims, 3 were over the age of 80. One, Betty Forsyth, was a 94-year-old who was described as a good friend to birds and squirrels. She was born the year that Band-Aids and popsicles were invented and lived through World War II, where her father disappeared at sea serving his country. She had 94 years of stories and memories, and after a lifetime of adventure, a man with a vendetta against the world shamelessly took her out. It was 1:25 p.m. when calls began to flood in about pedestrians being hit. Police sent out a bolo for a white Ryder van, and it didn't take long before Constable Ken Lamb spotted the van just west of Yonge Street. At that point, the van had sustained so much damage that it was hardly drivable. Upon being boxed in by the police cruiser, Alek got out. What happened next is one of the greatest moments of police work I've ever seen. Constable Liam raised his gun, ordering Alek to lie down on the ground. In response, Alek raised what appeared to be a pistol from his back pocket. Refusing to put the gun down, Alek repeatedly screamed that he wanted Constable Liam to shoot him in the head. Constable Liam legally could have. Alek was pointing a weapon at him, had committed a heinous crime, and seemed entirely unpredictable. But then Constable Liam noticed something. Alek didn't have a gun. It was just his wallet. He grabbed his baton, a non-lethal weapon, and tried to goad Alek into coming closer to him. Alek repeatedly flashed his weapon, trying to force the constable to shoot him, but he refused. When the constable turned the tables on him, approaching him with the baton, Alek threw his wallet aside and surrendered. Backup officers arrived, but by then, Constable Liam had already had Alek in cuffs. At the station during intake, Alek made it clear just how much of a strange interrogation the officers were in for.
Are you suffering from any illnesses?
Yes, I'm a murdering piece of shit.
Alek was swiftly moved into an interrogation room where he wasted no time admitting to his crime and providing the investigator with his motive.
So when you're on 4chan, what specifically are you, and 4chan, when you're on your different websites, and Forever Alone, let me ask you this, sorry, I'm going to sound confusing. Which are you more active on in terms of
4chan?
4chan, okay. When did you first, sorry, you mentioned this and I forgot, when did you first go on to 4chan?
2014.
2014, and specifically when in 2014?
May 23, 2014.
And how were you able to remember that?
Because I remember that was a very significant day.
Okay, what was that?
That was when Elliot Rodger decided to essentially commit an uprising, a beta uprising, if you will,
right,
against the Chads and the Stacys.
Okay, and that was in the United States?
Yes.
And so when you talk about...
Well, because incels don't believe in borders.
Right, okay.
So locations are irrelevant to us.
Right. But for geographical reference only, am I right to understand it occurred in California?
Yes.
Okay. And what type of uprising occurred? What happened?
It was a beta uprising.
A beta uprising? Okay.
Although he didn't call it a beta uprising at the time. Someone else who was inspired by him by the name of Chris Harper called it a beta uprising sometime in, actually I believe it was October 1, 2015.
It was 2014.
No, someone else named Chris Harper Mercer in 2015 called it a beta uprising. I'm only retroactively assigning the label beta uprising to the Elliot Rodgers.
Okay. So explain to me this movement. What's this movement about?
It's basically a movement of angry incels, such as myself, who are unable to get laid. Therefore, we want to overthrow the Chads, which would force the Stacys to be forced to reproduce with the incels.
Right. Okay. When you say incels,
involuntary celibate.
Celibate. So that's just a short form for fellas who
can't get laid.
Can't have sex. Right. Okay.
Chads and Stacys are incel terms related to conventionally attractive and sexually successful people. Incels believe that Chads have to be white, tall, muscular, have strong jawbones, and be rich. Stacys have to be voluptuous, blonde, and white. Anyone who doesn't fit these standards is socially and sexually less than by society's standards, at least in their eyes.
And so what did you discuss with these guys?
We discussed our frustrations at society and being unable to get laid, and we were plotting a certain timed strikes on society in order to confuse and shake the foundations, just to put all the normies in a state of panic.
Okay, and who would be a normie?
Normie means normal people. That would be anyone who is considered to be normal by the unfair standards of society.
But not the Chads or Stacys.
Chads and Stacys are actually above normies, or at least they think they're above normies.
Of course, yeah. Okay, all right. So is it fair to say you've got Chads and Stacys up here, normies down here, and then you've got celebs who believe that they are being repressed? Incels, sorry.
Yes.
Incels who believe they're being suppressed or repressed. Yes. And so as a result, to even the playing field.
Yes.
They convert the Stacys and Chads from living to dead, and to make
that we come out on top.
Yeah, more than so. Is there so the targets? Who would the targets for this uprising be?
All of the alpha males.
All the alpha males. So the Chads.
Yes.
So those are the people that you want to kill.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And who else?
Any any of the Stacys who do not wish to give their love and affection to the incels.
So they're a target as well.
Yes.
To be killed.
Yes.
Okay.
Alek never denied his involvement in the murders. Instead, he took pride in them. A year after the Toronto van attacks, Alek was charged with 10 counts of murder and 13 counts of attempted murder, which was eventually bumped up to 16 counts in May. His father, Vahe, was the only person who showed up to trial for his son of his family members. Throughout the proceedings, he was visibly distraught, at times silently crying. Though Alek's defense team tried to claim that his autism distorted his way of thinking and made him inculpable of the crime, psychiatrists and autism activists wildly disagreed. Ultimately, Alek was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility for parole for at least 25 years, but the damage he left behind still remains.
Take your time, go slowly.
This is what survival looks like.
This is 81-year-old Beverly Smith, who lost both of her legs in the attack. In what should be her golden years to relax, she has to learn to crawl and is hardly able to sit herself up. She is just one of many of Alek's victims. And it all began with the disturbing thoughts and actions of this man, Elliot Rodger. For years before he committed the attack that inspired Alek, Elliot got into vicious fights, attacked couples, and demeaned Asian men despite being half Asian himself. If you want to see the depths of his twisted mind and explore what his rise to madness looked like, well, be sure to check out our video on that here.